And if you do you have any sense of what the timetable for something like that would be?
Yeah, I've been in that process before, and it is a committee that is made up of athletic directors and commissioners, and it takes the information quite well in a sense that it looks at all mitigating factors in it. Whereas your initial, it's pretty cut and dry relative. So, you know, we obviously feel as though we've got some information that we would like the NCAA to see. I don't make that decision. You know, our athletic director and senior associate would make that final decision. But I think we have some information that we probably would like to share.
And the senior associate's Joe Bowden?
Yes, that's correct.
And then Alze Max?
Yeah,
he's
he's been 100%. I think he's looked really good and has been very active.
The two freshmen, I know that you've been impressed with them in the interior defensive line, Kurt Heinisch and Myron Tagovailoa-Amosa. Can you expand a little bit on their development, their progress, and what's been able to get them to push into the two deeps?
Well, let's all, you know, keep it in perspective, too. I mean, you know, we're not talking about 50 plays here. You know, we're talking about, you know, a role that we believe that they can fulfill for us. You know, and they have handled it because of they have the physical ability to go in there and compete. They're strong. They possess the mental capability to handle what we're throwing at them in terms of picking up the coaching techniques. And I think, quite frankly, we're not asking them to play 40, 50 plays. These are small roles that we're going to ask them to play, and we think that they can handle, you know, that type of role that we're prescribing for them.
Julian Love seems like a guy that every time we have a media window, it seems like he's getting better.
Yeah.
And maybe he's just good for us, but what do you feel like the key to his versatility, his progress, you know, being a guy that's probably one of your better players going into your opener? Well,
you know, it's an interesting observation in that sometimes we just look at you know, what they do on the field and their production on the field. He has been so productive in the weight room as well. You know, we did some speed squats yesterday, which is a real indicator of where you are in terms of neuromuscular firing. In other words, let me just, and a lot of you people understand what I'm talking about, but it's the ability to fire quickly, stick your foot in the ground after 25 practices. You tend to slow down a little bit. He's increased by about 22% in that area. So here's somebody that has been getting a lot of work, a lot of reps. His GPS has been at a high rate, in other words, his player load in practice, but yet continues to increase in the weight room. So we're hitting a young man who's just physically continuing to develop, and that is also translating into his play. So we're just getting a young man who's physically growing, maturing, and he's already had that character, those character traits to play at such a young age. So we're just really blessed that we've got a young man that has it all together right now.
Coach, when you look at Florida, you talked about the defensive pedigree that Coach Collins brought with him, but also inherited from what Coach Rule had. But when you look at film, what is it that you've seen from what he's done, or maybe what Coach Johnson did at Purdue, that tends to give teams problems, which has allowed them to have the success they've had defensively?
You know, they're an aggressive group. You know, they like to play some cover one. You know, they'll bring the corners. They'll keep you off balance. I think that's the best way that I would put it. They're not a bland defense. You don't know exactly where they're going to line up. They have a third down package that's pretty comprehensive. So they had some pretty good athletes at Florida defensively that could get after the quarterback. So all in all, I think, you know, I think what if there's a hallmark for what Coach Collins did at Florida, was that I thought he used his personnel very well. They weren't particularly easy to put a finger on what they were going to run from down to down. I thought he did a good job mixing things up and pressures, and they weren't, again, when we broke down film, they weren't a group that say they're always going to line up like this. So pretty good diversity, but not crazy, where it was undisciplined. It was very fundamental and sound, just good, solid football.
Do you see much of a shift from, obviously you played Temple 2 years ago, you've got film of their players last year. Is it a dramatic shift from what they did from a schematic standpoint, or is there some carryover?
There's some differences there. I think Phil Snow was doing some different things in the back end of the defense. But, again, I think, coaching is going to take advantage of the players that you have at hand. They were really good off the edge last year. They lost a lot of production from getting after the quarterback. They're going to have to find some production there. I think they've got some guys coming back, but they've got a talented secondary. We expect them to be active with those guys. So you're always, you go into an opener, you got to be prepared for a little bit of everything. So that's why sometimes it's more important to worry about what you do and how you execute than trying to reach so far to think what might happen to you in the opener. Be sound and fundamental in what you do, and then kind of adapt to what happens during the game.
Relating that to kind of what they do to the fact you've got a first-year starting quarterback, do you feel like the test that you're going to get this week and then kind of looking at the next month of really good defenses, do you feel like something like that early on is good for a young quarterback to kind of maybe a trial by fire, or would you rather, I think everybody kind of like to maybe break a guy in if you can, but do you feel that can be good for a kid when you look over a 12-game schedule? He's going to get tested right away. You're going to know what you got in him early on, I would imagine. Yeah,
I think as it relates to Brandon, there's going to be some things in each and every game that he's going to have to go through and fight through a little bit of adversity each and every week. But he's got such a great mindset, and he's going to be able to handle things quite well. He does a good job of putting something aside and moving on. He doesn't dwell on a mistake and let it affect the next play, because he's going to have that happen to him. I'd be more concerned if this was a young man that let mistakes in camp eat at him. He's made some mistakes in camp, but he can put them behind him and move to the next play, because he's going to have that in the first couple of weeks. I'm okay with that. I'd like to get tested in some fashion. I hope Temple doesn't test us. I think they will. But I think the quarterback's demeanor and his makeup is such that whatever he gets in front of him, he's going to be able to park it and move on to the next.
Brian, up here.
Yeah.
Defensively speaking, if you had to prioritize maybe 3 areas that you really need to see improvement on in that unit, what would you say? How would you answer that?
3 areas? Well, I mean, we weren't very good, overall defensively in a number of areas. But look, I mean, to play great defense, the basic tenets are not going to change, right? You got to be great against the run. I mean, there's nobody in here that follows football to say you're going to be a defense that's successful if you can't stop the run. So we can't give up the big plays that we gave up last year, against the run. So we've got to get the ball down. And we've got to get it down by the line of scrimmage, not on the other end of the field. So downing the football, playing really good, run defense, it starts there. Then I think, how we support the football, how we run support. And that's so important in itself. So that to me is number one. Solid run support, getting the football down, that run defense is component number one. Component number two for us is in the back end of our defense, not giving up those big plays down the field. We gave up too many of them early in the season, and it put us behind. We got better later, but early it became an issue when we lost football games. And then the third, ball disruptions. We've got to be able to take away the football. And I think all three of those areas have been areas that we've seen growth in our football team. It's what we have really drilled in our football team defensively to get better in those three areas.
And all of those are areas that Mike Elko has been very good in. So what kind of influence has he really been at the core of what you're seeing in these improvements?
Well, if you just came to our practice, you would see those three things being drilled ad nauseum. And you'd look at the defensive practice field, and you'd see guys mirroring the offhand of the quarterback, working on stripping the football, run support lanes, tackling, run fits, all of the things that I just mentioned. You can talk about them, and they sound great, and they're great sound bites, but you better do something every single day to develop that. And what Mike does is he drills that every single day and builds that within the practice schedules. And I've even had to adjust our practice schedules to make certain that we get that time in the schedule so he can drill that to the point where he feels comfortable that we're getting to that fundamental kind of football.
Last one for me, a little bit off the beaten path. If I'm not mistaken, you have three guys, Michael Young, Brock Wright, and Jeff Riney, that are kind of in that Hurricane Harvey area. Have you had any feedback from those guys? Yeah,
each one of them obviously was concerned and has been concerned. They've touched base with family members, and all of them are okay. They all have different stories about friends or relatives or past homes that they've lived in, but all three of them, thank you for asking, are fine, and their families are fine.
Brian, center, more center. Oh, yeah. I was just curious, the running back rotation, you have maybe better depth there than you've had in maybe a couple seasons. How do you see that playing out on Saturday? More of a hot hand approach, or do you sort of see Josh as a couple steps ahead of Dexter and Tony there?
All three of them, I think, are, I don't know how to put it in grading terminology, but they all have futures to play past this level. They're that kind of player. So when you have three outstanding backs, they all have to fit in what you're doing in some fashion. I think each one of them has a little bit of a different style. So answer question one would be definitely play a guy that has a hot hand, but you have two other guys that if they're fresh, we're not going to run a guy where he's not at 100%. So I think you're going to see more of a rotational basis with the three of them. And it will start with Josh Adams at the top of the list. Whether he's two ahead or a little bit ahead, I mean, I think they're all really, really fine backs, and all of them will be contributing to our success in some fashion.
Kind of game plan based.
Yeah, but it would surprise me, Pete, if all three of them weren't actively involved in the game. Because, as you know, we're going to play more than one back. I mean, so, they're all going to be actively involved in the game plan.
Sort of a similar question on defense. Last year at the beginning of the year, you wanted to play more guys. End of the year, you sort of did. Do you sort of pick up where you left off in terms of, getting Tavon, maybe Troy Pride, just trying to, Trombetti, Khalid, guys sort of right there where you sort of see more of a rotation than 11 guys playing 85 snaps?
Yeah, 11 guys playing 85 snaps is not the kind of defense that we're about. We're about really, I'll just give you the example of a Trombetti. A Trombetti is a guy that can play either end position for us, and so right away, he's a guy that comes to mind as somebody that's going to be sharing both sides of that. You know, Tavon Coney, obviously, with Greer immediately. I think we can talk about more than 2 corners being on the field. We mentioned the 2 freshmen are going to have to play a role in the defensive line rotation. So, you know, just right there, you know, you're talking about, you know, 15, 16 defensive players immediately having to be in a rotation.
And just coaching staff position on game day. I think you got 2 guys up top, and the rest are down. It might be less of a split than maybe it's been in the past. I'm not 100% sure, but
it is.
Just talk about why that's a good fit.
Yeah,
for you
so I
guys.
sit down with the coordinators, and we clearly go over, you know, what communication system do we like, who our signalers are, what forms of communication do we want on the sideline with the players. So we kind of just start with that and begin with, do the coordinators want to be watching the game from the box, and whether I have a strong feeling in that, or do you want to be on the sideline? And then we kind of go to work on who we believe where the assets are and how they best fit, and then we kind of put it together from there.
And with Chip calling plays, what's, you know, you've been calling him on the sideline a lot. What's the advantage of being down there post up top? Because I feel like a lot of guys are up top.
I think he wants to get a feel and a comfort level. That's where he's going to start. He'll start the first game on the sideline and see how that rolls. I think he just wants to get, you know, a real good feel of the game itself, and all of our personnel and our communication. It could change, but that's where we'll start it.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think we're
Brian,
over here.
with a lot of new staff members, assistant coaches, with a new quarterback, a lot of elements of the stadium that are new, what are you most curious about game day on Saturday?
You know, I don't know that I have a curiosity. I don't know that that word really hits my brain as much as I want to see our players really go and play with a sense of, you know, welcome to my preparation. I've prepared myself for this opportunity. I'm here to dominate the day. And not play apprehensive, not play with, you know, weight on my shoulder. I'm at Notre Dame. Go play. Have fun. Be excited. You've prepared for this opportunity. So if maybe we squeeze that word a little bit more in terms of curiosity, maybe I'm a bit curious as to whether they'll play like that. I think they will, though. So I guess, more than anything else, as you can see, I'm excited to see them go play more than anything else.
And after last year, with maybe some heightened scrutiny, coming off a losing season for the first time at Notre Dame, how, days away from the opener, how is the pressure that you feel compared to past years where there's always that inherent pressure of coaching here?
I think it's, you know, always, for me, I've always felt like there's an expectation that you have to have being the head coach at Notre Dame. It's God, country, and Notre Dame. That's a pretty high bar, and you should live up to that bar. I didn't live up to that bar, so and so I think that as the head coach at Notre Dame, every year is the same way, that you've got to live up to that high bar, and this year is no different. We come into this year with our mission is to win the national championship. That's a pretty high bar. So I think you feel that every single year.
Brian, your left.
Yeah.
What do you think is the toughest part about preparing for and then executing in an opener?
Well, kind of some of the things that we talked about, right? The uncertainty of, you know, a new coach, the uncertainty of, you know, what you're going to see. But then you have to kind of just say, well, okay, how about we just worry about what we're going to do? And that should really be where your focus is. And not worry about it, but let's just go play. You know, kind of like what I was just talking about. Let's just go play with a mindset of let's go out and exhibit our traits and do the things that we've been trained to do, and play with that competitive mindset, and really don't worry about it. Because if you worry about all those things, then the opener becomes one of these openers where you're trying to make adjustments to everything. And then you become, you know, analysis, and there's too much paralysis. And so I think that's what we're trying to avoid.
Aside from the physical preparation of your team, which you've talked about a lot in camp, I know you're excited to see that. Is there one element of this team that you feel best about aside from that?
I think the mental preparation of our football team has been something that I've taken quite a bit of time to help develop. You know, total preparation for me is certainly the physical, and you know, the technical, the tactical has got to be part of that, but the mental is absolutely crucial. And I think that this football team, as prepared as any team that I have coached from a mental perspective. And that's something that will continue to grow, but I've taken a great amount of time to really spend time on, and our coaches have done a terrific job of really following my lead, of working with our football team from that mental performance standpoint, and how effective that can be to helping them reach their potential.
We'll talk to the players. No doubt they're excited for Saturday. They've looked forward to this for a long time. Where's your level of enthusiasm for this weekend?
As I said earlier, I can't wait to watch our guys in a sense of their preparation and just performing and competing, right? Taking all this teaching and preparation and then pushing play and letting it go. I just can't wait for that. I mean, the days are just going too slow for me. Like, if we could get Temple here a little bit earlier, it'd be fine with me. They're a fine football team, but I'm just excited about watching our team play.
Brian, you mentioned a little earlier, but what are some of those characteristics in Brandon that make you believe that he's ready for his first start here?
I think really where it starts for most quarterbacks that I have coached is their ability to move through a poor play and get to the next play. Let it go and move on to the next play and not let it affect the next one. He has the great ability to show, and I know you hear this quite a bit now, it's chronicled everywhere, but he's got a passion for the game and he's got perseverance. You know, I think Angela Duckworth called that in her book Grit, right? He's got grit, you know, he's got such a passion for what he does, and because he loves what he does, he doesn't get down. If he makes a mistake, he fights through it, and he gets to the next play. That's a great quality to have in anything that we do in life. I mean, I'd like to be better at it too, but he does it at the quarterback position, which is a really fine trait to have for a young player.
Brian, to your left.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, offensively, you kind of had the oddity of driving right down the field and scoring opening touchdowns with your script to start about 9 of the 12 games, but there would be a drought thereafter. Did you and your staff kind of research how to mitigate those droughts? What might have caused it? Extending the script, is that something that can happen?
I don't remember anything about last year. That's somewhere else. I know what we're doing this year. And we're going to extend those drives to the second drive and the third drive, the fourth and the fifth and the sixth.
Is it a script situation? You were extremely successful. You've been successful really in the past.
Play calling is an art and a science, right? So there's a combination of both. I mean, you can script plays, right? You still have to execute them. And then, you know, if you run out of the script, you know, maybe there's a little bit of, you know, the art to it as well. So, you know, play calling is a combination of both. I don't know how to answer the question other than we didn't do, you know, a good enough job if that was the case. But like I said, that was last year, this year is this year, and we plan on scoring more.